right, everybody. Welcome back to the Rivalry Week of Across the Campus, the college sports podcast presented by atbsports.net. I'm Alex, the captain, and alongside me today, I've got AJ, the guru.
What's going on?
What's going on, AJ? Well, before we dive in, let's kind of do some recap over the last week. Big upset we got to talk about: Oregon losing. That was big.
It was one that I don't think a lot of people even had their eyes on for the simple fact that it's the West Coast, you're out west rather. Nobody really pays attention to it here in our part of the country. But I did watch it, and Herm Edwards seems like he's got Arizona State going in the right direction out there.
And Arizona State's been one of those teams. I mean, they're 6-5 right now, so they're bowl eligible. Like, that win was huge for them moving forward to bowl eligibility. But I think that now that he's added that win, I mean, they just look dominant. Jaden Daniels, the freshman quarterback, he just looked absolutely stellar. He had 3 touchdowns for 408 yards. Just could not be stopped.
He's a freshman, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. He, from what I saw, he likes to throw the ball. That's for sure. He was able to air it out, I thought, very well. And I was talking to one of my buddies about this earlier, about the Hubert out there, the Oregon's quarterback. He's going to lose so much money because he didn't come out of the draft last year.
Yep.
He does not nearly have nearly the hype he did last year at this time. Last year they were talking number 1 overall pick and this and that and the other, and he decided to go back to Oregon. And I'm assuming to get his degree, which is great. No knock against that. But when it comes to his draft stock, I don't know if he's probably late first round, I'd assume, but he's no first round or no high first round first overall like he was last year at this point.
Absolutely. And I think, you look at this Arizona State defense, I mean, they weren't necessarily swarming him. They were just always in the right position. They picked him off twice. I think that they exposed him and really showed, okay, this kid, he's a great quarterback, but if you position things and hide your coverage as well, you can't. He can't figure it out. And I think that really showed last night. And not last night, Saturday. And it shouldn't have, considering that Arizona State is, 6-5. They're not a good program this year. They're going in the right direction. They're definitely trending upward. But this shouldn't have been a game that they were in at all.
No. I'm looking at the numbers right here. Herbert was 20 of 36 for 304, averaging 8.3 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks. I mean, 300 yards against anybody is still good. That's still absolutely a good day. But when you look at on the overall on the year, he's thrown for just under 3,000 yards at 30 touchdowns, 5 picks, and ranks 20th in QBR at 75.8.
Yeah, that's different than last year for sure.
A little bit.
Now, I think, and this could just be speculation, I think they knew they'd already had the division clinched, so they weren't really worried about this game. I think they were looking ahead, and we'll talk about this later in the podcast. They were looking ahead to the Civil War.
Sure.
And who doesn't? When you play a seemingly weaker opponent the week before a big rivalry game, when don't you look past that?
Right.
And I think
that's one of those games that's in the back of your head every week of the year. Like, you're always going to be thinking about it.
Well, and I know that some programs out there, I feel like Ohio State did this under Jim Tressel. They may have done it under Urban Meyer as well, but they would run like one play in practice.
Yep, they had
Michigan.
They had rivalry period.
Yeah.
Yeah, they still do.
Okay. Yeah, I knew that was something that Ohio State had done. I didn't know if that was a continuation.
Yep,
and that's a cool tradition. I think that's, and I think a lot of premier programs do that. I'm sure Alabama does that. I'm sure Auburn does that. Whether or not Michigan does, I don't know. We can talk about Michigan too. I mean, they're clicking at the right time. Yep. They're looking pretty good. But again, I guess we'll cover all those big games later. But let's move on to Penn State, Ohio State.
Yeah.
That was a great game. If you like a tight football match, I was really impressed with how Penn State played in this game and really slowed down Ohio State's offense. Yeah,
they did. Penn State really. If you take away 3 turnovers that Ohio State had, Penn State doesn't score a touchdown in that game though. And it was kind of like the Buckeyes showed up in the first, second, and fourth quarter of that game. Whatever happened in the third quarter is beyond me. I'm not sure, just kind of lackadaisical. And I thought about it too. A lot of these stars hadn't played in the third quarter all year long,
Yeah.
And so maybe, this got a little comfortable or whatever it was, but those 3 turnovers, one by Fields, or I think it was 2 by Fields and 1 by Dobbins, they're early on in the third quarter. It even gave them great field position to start with. That really did help, or really helped Penn State, and it put the Buckeye defense in a tough spot, being in the plus territory. And Penn State was able to capitalize with 2 touchdowns and a field goal. And then, fourth quarter turnaround, I think the Buckeyes figured out, okay, we can't do this anymore. We got to, this game's a little too close for comfort. Let's pick it up a little bit, and they did. And they obviously came out with a big win.
Yeah, I really, I was really watching this game, kind of out of the corner, while I was in Boston, whatever. And people were talking about it as we were walking around the city. And I was just absolutely surprised to hear, oh, yeah, Penn State's only down 4. And I'm like, okay, it must be the first quarter. And I look, it's the third quarter, and Penn State's down 21-17.
Yeah.
And, as a college football fan, and I think a lot of people can appreciate a good matchup like that, Ohio State was held to their lowest per quarter average of the season.
Right. This is the only game that they had not won by 20. They had not won by over 20 points.
Yeah. An 11-point win over a solid Penn State team. I almost don't wonder if the result would have been a little bit different had they played in Happy Valley.
I don't know if it's so much that had a chance to, but also losing your starting quarterback in the third quarter as well.
Yeah.
That hurt into a sense, but they brought a quarterback at the 11s. Clifford went out in the third. He was 10 for 17 for 71 yards, and Levens came in. He was 6 of 11 for 57, but he also ran for 34, and he ran the ball pretty well too, I thought, because it was tough because Ohio State did not have any film on him, so he was able to kind of do some things that Clifford was unable to do.
Yep.
But when he got towards the back at the tail end of the game, the Penn State offense was, they had their back towards the Ohio State student section, and they had 3 miscues on snaps. And James Franklin said it in his press conference. He goes, they were just guessing the cadence because they couldn't hear. They couldn't communicate plays in from the sideline to the field, or they could not. Or the line could not hear Levens with his cadence.
Yeah, didn't you say something like
factors.
They were just guessing what the cadence was?
Yeah, they were just kind of guessing, saying, okay, this seems fine, because I think they had 2 or 3 fumbled snaps. And Ohio State did cover one of those, but the officials blew it dead before and called a false start. So it was, I think one time the entire offensive line moved but the center, and then the other time was the center moved and everybody else didn't. And so that's kind of a tough spot. With the backup quarterback and with 107,000, however many people were there, that's a tough spot. So and coming in relief for a pretty solid quarterback in Clifford. But like we mentioned, yeah, he was 10 of 17 for 71 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. And Levens threw 1 pick, and that was to Justin Hilliard over the middle late in the third quarter.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really like Journey Brown, the running back here. He and I think he really kind of helped out Levis during that spell that Clifford was out. I know that he was able to come back into that game and play. But Franklin said, "Look, I'm liking what Levis is doing right now. I'm going to stick with Levis."
Absolutely.
Why risk getting Clifford hurt again?
Sure. Yeah, Brown, he had 11 carries for 64 yards and 1 touchdown. And then the kind of guy who, like KJ Hamler, they weren't sure if he was going to play or not. It was a game time decision. He came out with three receptions, 45 yards, no touchdowns, and his longest was 22.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Penn State they had 3 turnovers, 2 fumbles, 1 pick, and the Buckeyes turnover wise had 3 fumbles. Fields had 3 fumbles, lost 2 of them, and Dobbins had 1. He lost 1 of those. So, I mean, numbers wise for the Buckeyes, passing Fields was 16 of 22 for $188. Still not his best game, but he had 2 touchdowns out of it. Dobbins ran the ball 36 times for $157, which is huge. That's more yards than he's had all year, or more carries than he's had probably in his career. Fields had 21 carries for 68 yards. Master Teague, he only had 2 carries for 7 yards, and for some reason it seemed like he had a lot more than that. But his longest was 8. That doesn't make any sense. He must have been in the negative at one point. He must have had a negative
probably.
play. But yeah, KJ Hill, they were able to get the ball around to, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 receivers throughout the game for that 188 yards. And defensively too, Pete Warner. I saw he got a defensive player of the game with 10 total tackles, 8 solo, and Tracy Young was man amongst boys with 3 sacks again, kind of putting his stamp back out onto the field, saying he didn't miss a whole lot. Which, in retrospect, he really didn't miss a lot. He missed Maryland and Rutgers, and so he didn't miss too much. I mean, his sack total of the year. Exactly. His sack total on the year would be 20 if he had played those 2 games. But he's sitting there at 16.5.
Yeah, it's
on the year.
I mean, he's a stud. Like, and anybody who watches college football knows just how good he actually is.
Yeah,
and it's I mean, he's a fun player to watch too, and it's really good to see that he's back from that suspension. Nice tune-up for him against Penn State before, obviously, the game we'll talk about later, Ohio State, Michigan, the game as it's known all across the country, the greatest rivalry in college sports.
Absolutely.
It's a really quick thing of note. Looking at some college basketball scores, and we'll jump back into football here in a second. Yale takes down Western Michigan. Dayton beat University of Georgia. But right now,
I saw that.
Yeah, right. That was a big one. But right now, Virginia Tech is leading number 3 Michigan State with just under 10 minutes to go in the second quarter, 49-45. So that'll be a game to keep an eye on.
Sure. And the Buckeyes are playing Kent State right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that should be interesting. The Ohio State women, I saw this earlier, lost to Ohio University last week.
I think it was last week, 2 weeks ago, something like that. Yeah.
And that Ohio University women's team looks really, really good
they
right
do.
now. They're clicking on all cylinders. I think they were a preseason favorite to win the MAC, and they're showing why.
Absolutely.
Anyway, back to football scores. Baylor, Texas.
Yeah.
Baylor responded from that embarrassing loss. Came out, they handled Texas, beat them by 14, sends them to the Big 12 championship game, or the quote-unquote Big 12 championship game, because I don't think that's actually a true championship game,
no,
right?
It's not. No, it's not.
And that was, I'm sure that, those guys are feeling good about themselves. I mean, they led 21-3 at one point, and just really kind of took control of that game. Really from the second quarter on. Slow start for both Texas and Baylor. But you really look at, what Matt Rule, the coach, is doing down there. And he's talking about how proud he is that the players are just sticking with it. Last week was a make or break for a team like Baylor, who hadn't really been in an undefeated spot this late in the year. And they responded the right way. And now they have a chance to make the playoffs potentially. It's a long shot, but
sure.
But they're still alive.
Yeah, Baylor's sitting there ranked 14 at 10-1, and Texas 6-5. Sam Ehlinger, he threw it for 37 times, completed 22 attempts for 200 yards on the dot, no touchdowns, 1 pick, with a QBR of 24-9. That definitely won't get it done.
No.
And then rushing wise, they had, I think total they had 391 yards because they had a $191 rushing. Yep. That was between 4 running backs. And so they really just couldn't find their groove there. Corey Brewer was 16 of 25 for 221 with 1 touchdown, no picks. He also was the leading rusher with 18 attempts, 75 yards, and 1 rushing touchdown as well. I've become a big fan of his over the past year or so. He's just kind of a quarterback you don't really hear a whole lot about. His dad and brother played at Texas, and he doesn't get an offer from Texas, so he goes to Baylor, and he kind of shows out there. He's only a junior as well.
Yeah. No, he's a smart player, super focused on what he's doing, super underrated, kind of like what you were saying. I really like watching him move the ball. He's effective with it. He's not he doesn't make mistakes that he could avoid.
Right.
Any interceptions or things like that, or I don't want to say they're not his fault, but you watch how he plays and he's just so fluid that a lot of those are tipped passes off of the receiver's hands and things like that. So it's
right.
He's a very smart kid, very smart with how he protects the ball. Yeah,
because on the year here, let's see if I can find it. He only has 5 picks on the year. He's thrown for 2,753 yards, 19 touchdowns, and a QBR of 73.1. But yeah, like I said, those 5 picks, not bad, really. I mean, compared to what he's done in previous years,
yeah,
it's not bad.
No, he's solid kid. Really, really looks the part of a strong college quarterback.
Sure.
And, yeah, I'm excited to see. I hope, I don't think he'll declare for the draft. I think we talked about this last week. So I hope he comes back next year and takes it up another level.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I haven't heard his name brought up really by any, mock draft type people. So I mean, and he's one of those guys too. He's just kind of from Baylor, out of the way, doing his own thing, and nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And because Baylor's that program, right? That every once in a while they'll get like this phenomenal athlete that everybody talks about, but it's Baylor. You don't think of national championships or consistency with the Heisman Trophy or even Big 12 championships. Like, that's Baylor. Okay, they're gonna give us a tough outing, but it's Baylor. Other scores, kind of note: Georgia squeaking by Texas A&M. That was tight right down to the end.
Yeah, that was. I was able to catch bits and pieces of that game, and yeah, it really was a little too close for comfort, I think, for Georgia fans.
And I'm sure Georgia is probably looking ahead. They know that they're playing in not the Big 12, the SEC championship here in 2 weeks. They've already clinched that division. They could have lost last week and this next week and still gone, which I think is crazy.
Right.
But yeah, that was really, really close. And
Jake Fromm, he was 11 of 23 for $163, only one touchdown. DeAndre Swift had 19 carries for 103 yards, but Fromm had three carries for -20, and the team had -17. So that brought the total rushing yards down for Georgia to 97.
That's insane.
And that brought down the average from 5.4 to 2.7 yards per carry.
And that won't get it done against many teams, but fortunately they weren't playing Alabama.
Right. That's definitely something they're not going to want in the SEC championship against LSU.
Oh, goodness, no. The LSU will tear them apart if that's the same performance they show
Absolutely. And Texas A&M, they're sitting there with a 7-4 record. They're not overly too bad, I don't think.
No.
I mean, let's see, let me look at their numbers here.
They have a loss to Clemson.
Yep, lost to Clemson.
Lost to Auburn. And a loss to Alabama. And the Alabama loss is the only blowout.
Yeah. And they barely squeaked by Arkansas.
Yeah, like they're not an awful program. I mean, they've got an almost 20-point win over Mississippi State. The Auburn loss was a possession. So I mean, they've been playing well this year. It's just they're one of those middling SEC teams who's just not quite over the hump, and that's fine.
Right. They were there 3 years ago or whatever it was with Johnny Football.
Yep.
And then he leaves, and then Mike Evans. That whole era. Those guys leave, and then they fire Kevin Sumlin. They bring in from Florida State. Why am I blanking his name?
I can pull it up really quick while you.
Why am I blanking his name? They're paying him a lot of money.
Yes, they are. I've seen people all over the internet like, we're paying him this much money. Here, pay me half that, and I'll coach this team.
Right. Jimbo Fisher.
Yes,
I don't know why that name skipped my. Yeah, but yeah. They it's like what, $100 million or something like that.
Yeah, his contract is stupid. It's one of the highest in all of college football.
And it's all guaranteed, I think, right?
I think most of it's guaranteed. I think there are a couple bonuses, but I think like $94 million of it is guaranteed money. It's stupid how much of it is that he's pocketing just to be there. Another close game, Oklahoma, TCU. Oklahoma, a little bit of a hangover, I think, is the issue there. They didn't look stellar. Jalen Hurts had 2 touchdowns and then ran for 2 more, so he had all of their scores. But like the rest of the team just kind of said, "Well, we're good. We'll let Jalen take care of tonight."
Yeah, that was. I mean, TCU really had them on the ropes there. They're trying to fight for bowl eligibility, and this was I think this was the game TCU needed in order to get over that hump, because it's 5-6 right now. TCU is, and they look to West Virginia next week, who's sitting there at 4-7. That's actually a Friday game. TCU's favored by 12 points. But yeah, I think this is one TCU's going to look back on. They really needed this one because they had so many opportunities to do so. With they got some turnovers that went their way. Some trickery went their way and whatnot, but they just came up just short there. Jalen Hurts was, as I mentioned, 11 of 22 for a $145, and he was also leading rusher. He had more rushing yards than passing yards. He had 28 carries for 173 yards, and then Brooks right under him with 25 carries for a $149. And then everybody else kind of just was in the middle of the pack. But CeeDee Lamb, he had 2 receptions for 16 yards. So the defense, TCU defense, did a phenomenal job of shutting him down. Their number one receiver, really. Then they Charleston Rambo. He led them in yards in receiving with 6 receptions for 77 yards. He averaged 12.8, and his longest was 36. But
the thing that interests me from this game, Jalen Hurts threw a rare interception that was returned. It was a pick 6, and that really, I think, kind of turned the tide for TCU to show that they could compete with this Oklahoma team who's still fighting to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, and Oklahoma, they are far on the outside looking in at this point, I think. They're sitting there at 9, and that's going to be tough to jump up 5 spots unless some crazy things happen this week. But, I mean, obviously Oregon's going to be out of there. Yep. Penn State will be out of there, so that's 2.
Georgia will be out of there in 2 weeks.
Georgia, in 2 weeks, yeah. So they might be sitting there at a 5 or 6 when it's all said and done. And, yeah, that one loss really is going to come back. I think it's going to hurt them.
Yeah, and that's so unfortunate. How that loss early, or not even early, but that loss is going to really damage their season.
To a mediocre Iowa State too, who's 5-4.
Yeah,
obviously it came down to a last-second field goal, but it's only the best top 4 teams, and Oklahoma's really not there, I don't think.
Right. No, they lost
Baylor.
They lost to Kansas State. They beat Iowa State 42-41.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
But they lost to Kansas State by a touchdown.
I was thinking the last second field goal, Iowa State and Texas. That crossed my mind. Yeah. But then Baylor. I mean, they had a great opportunity to beat Oklahoma too. They didn't get away. They lost by 3 there a couple weeks ago. But I think Jalen Hurts fits in really well in that system out there with the whole staff and kind of what they're running, because with Lincoln Riley, he has the ability. He was able to show it at Alabama, but this kind of spoiled with riches down there. He says, "All right, it's time for me to go somewhere where I can start." He's made most of his opportunities.
Absolutely, and he's done really. And he's like we mentioned about the guy for I'm just blanking now. Baylor. We just talked about him being a very smart player. Jalen Hurts is
Corey Brewer.
Yeah, thank you. Jalen Hurts is super smart and does what he needs to do to protect the ball as best he can. I mean, sure, he had a pick in this game, whatever. He's got 30 touchdowns to 6 interceptions on the season. He has the 4th best QBR at 92.1 on the year. And thrown for 3,200 yards. That's a smart player. You don't just see that happen every single day by anybody.
No, not at all. And he's done a good job too of protecting the ball this year. He's good with what programs he's been a part of. I mean, right now he's thrown for 3,184 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 6 picks. Like I said, the QBR of 92.1. So, I mean, he's good wherever he goes, and he's proven that over the past couple of years. He's definitely gonna be a first-round pick. At this point, who knows who's going to take him, because everything is kind of out of whack. With Tua going down, that kind of just throws things, kind of teams' plans out the door. But that's a conversation for later on and closer to draft season.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's averaging, fairly high numbers. I mean, I think this week against TCU had to be his lowest passing yardage game at 145.
Yeah, it was anemic compared to what other numbers he's been putting up on the year. But they got the job done, and at the end of the day, I guess
a win is a win.
Exactly. That's all that people really look at anymore. Wisconsin, we'll go over the rest of these really quick. Wisconsin, took care of Purdue. It was scary for a while.
Wisconsin started off extremely slow.
Yeah, they looked really bad right away.
Purdue was leading that at one point.
And but
second half they kind of pulled it out. Yeah.
Yeah, second half they just shut them down. Said, hey, let's. Jonathan Taylor had Another 200 yards again, 228. Like
he became the all-time
great.
leading rusher.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he had 222 yards. His longest was 51. Only one touchdown though. It's kind of strange with 28 carries, 222, average 7.9.
Yeah.
And only one tutter. But Cohen threw for two, and the defense had 2 touchdowns as well.
Yeah, the defense looked really good, especially in the second half. So Michigan took care of Indiana, was up 39 to 14.
That game was tied, I think, at 14 at halftime.
Michigan was up 21-7 at halftime. Or 21-14 at halftime.
21-14, yeah.
And then, but Shea Patterson looked good, had 5 scores. He is the first Michigan quarterback to have back-to-back weeks of 4 or more passing touchdowns in regulation.
Mm-hmm.
So he's starting to click at the right time. Auburn took care of Samford. No surprise there, 52-0, shut him out.
So the game that was kind of fun to watch, I saw highlights of, was Navy beating SMU 35-28.
That was wild.
Navy's sitting there; they kind of bounce around in and out of the rankings. There, SMU's sitting there at 9-2, and Navy 8-2 now. That was actually kind of a fun game to watch. I was able to catch some highlights there of that one. And obviously LSU just kind of blew out Arkansas. There's not a whole lot going on.
Right.
But Cincinnati squeaked by Temple there, 15-13. Let's talk about a real boring game.
Yeah,
it was 0-0. It was 0-0 after the first, and then 2 field goals for Cincinnati at halftime, so it was 6-0. Then Cincinnati goes up 13-0, and then gets a safety in the fourth, and Temple scores 13 in the fourth to make it that 15-13. But Cincinnati's Riddler quarterback, 9 of 25, 62 yards, 1 pick. That hurts. And their leading receiver only had 19 yards.
Yeah, that's it's not what you want. That's
no.
That's gross. Temple they've showed quote unquote flashes of brilliance, if you will. They've not been this amazing team, but they are sitting at 7-4.
Sure, and they have Rod Carey at the helm now, who's did great at Northern Illinois, and their punter actually went to my high school. Fun fact.
Oh, well, fact of the day.
Right, a couple years younger than me.
I just feel like this last week was a lot of teams kind of looking ahead, Cincinnati being one of them, because they've got a big game against Memphis this week, which is going to be really interesting because they're going to play Memphis again next week in the American Athletic Conference Championship. So back-to-back weeks. I'm really excited to see how that breaks down over the next 2 weeks.
That's Friday night on ABC, and Memphis is favored by 11. I think it's because it's at Memphis.
Okay.
So, but yeah, Cincinnati's sitting there at 19. Memphis is sitting there at 18. Now, where is that American Conference Championship game at?
That we can take a look really quick, and I will let you know. Week 15. Nope, that would be week 14. All right, so nope, that would be week 15. Oh, they don't have those.
They don't have it yet. Yeah.
Let me see. AAC Championship game 2019. It's either going to be held at Nippert Stadium in Cincinnati or Liberty Bowl Stadium in Memphis.
Okay.
It looks like whoever it gets bounced around.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting. It's going to be televised by ABC.
Yeah. Huh.
So actually Navy could still technically win that division. So Memphis actually needs to win tomorrow or this week in order to take the division. Okay,
that makes sense here. Yeah, because I just pulled up the standings as well.
So if Navy wins out, Navy could win the division. Because they... no, Memphis... If Memphis wins, it's theirs. Even if Navy wins out because they hold the tiebreaker. Okay. I see how that breaks down.
That makes sense. And okay, yeah.
That conference is such... And I know we talked about this last week. I was actually playing NCAA 14 the other day. And they have the AAC in there and all that. And they get auto bowl tie-ins to, like, the old BCS bowls. And I thought that was really interesting because, you can set who gets what tie-ins and whatnot.
Right.
So I grabbed Louisville and Cincinnati and put them in the MAC to play with Toledo, and then I keep scheduling Alabama every year in the Glass Bowl. But I think it's super interesting how that breaks down because the AAC was the old Big East, if I remember correctly.
Right. Yep.
And they were one of the power premier conferences. They had Miami before they split off and went to the ACC. Yeah, I mean, they were just one of those old conferences who just looked consistently good, and then now we're seeing teams like East Carolina and UConn. Nothing against those schools and those football programs, but nothing like what you would expect.
And I mean, in the past few years too, Houston has been a team to mess with, and they're sitting there at 4-7 right now, 2-5 in the conference, and and then they let go Major Applewhite last year, who took over for Tom Herman when he left for Texas, and they've kind of just slid through the cracks. They play Navy this week at Houston.
That'll be an interesting game. Because
that's prime time on ESPN too. Also,
okay.
And Navy, and it's kind of interesting here too because Navy's sitting there at 8-2, Houston's 4-7, and Navy's only favored by 9. I'm sure that'll change by.
I'm sure that will change.
Yeah.
Plenty over the next 2 weeks, or over the next week.
Next week, yeah.
Yeah. All right. I think that kind of wraps up for some of the big games.
Yeah.
Some of the scores.
One team I want to talk about real quick is Utah.
Utah. Okay. Yes, Utah. Let's talk about Utah.
They beat Arizona 35-7, and Utah's a team that, if anybody from the outside looking in is going to sneak in, it's going to be Utah.
Mm-hmm. And I think they could absolutely do it. I mean, they're right on the door. Oregon getting knocked out, that moves Utah up to at least 6. I don't think they'll leapfrog Alabama this week. But I think now what we're going to see is Alabama, or the College Football Playoff Committee, is in a weird predicament. Let's say Utah wins out and wins the Pac-12. Do you put a 12-1 conference champion named Utah in over a second best in the SEC West, Alabama?
I think so.
I think so too. But
Yeah,
I think the committee has that question because they then set a really bad precedent. Not only did you put a non-conference champion in, like they've done before, which is fine, but you now put the second best team in a division in.
Right. And you look at it, too, the committee's really never had a set precedent of how they do things. Mm-hmm. It's changed every year. And, maybe this is one year they can get it right. Because, you look at Utah, again, they're that team who always plays the 9:30, 10 o'clock game every Saturday. Nobody pays attention because, they're in bed. But Utah plays really good defense.
Yeah,
and they've got a quarterback who can throw the ball. I'm looking at their numbers right here. He threw to at least 15 different guys. And they protect the ball very well. Their running back, Moss, had 26 carries for 203 yards and 1 touchdown. Huntley, their quarterback, he threw it 23 times, completed 19 for 211, averaged 9.2 with 1 touchdown and 1 pick and a QBR of 87.1. And then he had Shelley come in for 1 play. He was 1 for 1, 9 yards. And so forth. But, they had 297 yards rushing. They moved the ball very well.
Yeah, they were
and that's kind of a team that doesn't get a whole lot of credit. And Arizona's not much to talk about, sitting there at 4-6. Kevin Sumlin's probably on his way out there as well.
Right.
But, yeah, Utah is a team that definitely can make some noise here the next week or so.
Absolutely. I mean, I was looking at some more of those numbers. Zach Moss, absolutely crushing it. 203 rushing yards. Like, that's nothing to sneeze at. Anytime you break really 175 anymore, like you're turning in a pretty good game.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So it's gonna be really interesting to see what happens here going forward. There's we only have 2 weeks really in the regular season, with Army Navy playing the week after everybody else does. Mm-hmm. But Utah's gonna make some noise, and it's gonna be interesting to see what they do.
Personally, I would love to see Utah make it just because they're a former mid-major school. They were in the Mountain West for the longest, and so I would love to see them break that proverbial glass ceiling, if you will. They broke into a Power 5 conference, and then win it and then make the playoffs. It's a cool story.
Absolutely. I think if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be them.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. All right, so I think now we can move into this next segment, the segment I've been excited about, Games of the Week.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of them because it's, as we love to call it, Rivalry Week.
That, and there's a lot at stake this week.
There is a lot on the line. There's a couple teams who can entirely miss conference championships based off of what somebody else does. Not even off of what they do, what somebody else does. And I think it's really, really cool. So
I'm looking at the lineup here for Friday. Iowa goes to Nebraska. Nebraska's trying to fight for bowl eligibility. They're sitting there at 5-6. Iowa 8-3. That'll be an interesting one. That's on BTN at 2:30 on a Friday. Perfect, because I have nothing to do Friday. So awesome.
There you go.
We talked about Cincinnati, Memphis. Boise State travels to Colorado State. Boise State's ranked 20, sitting there at 10-1. Not getting a whole lot of credit. Appalachian State, they travel to Troy. App State's sitting there at ranked 24, sitting there at 10-1. And Saturday we get into the meat of everything.
Yeah, I know we'll talk about that one last because I know which one you're looking at.
Let's go. Here's some of these other games here. Rutgers goes to Penn State. Rutgers is sitting there at 2-9. Penn State's 9-2. That's a BTN game on Saturday. Baylor goes to Kansas. Baylor's sitting there at 10-1, as we mentioned. Kansas 3-8. Oregon State.
Yep.
That'll be a great one. The what's that one called?
That is the Civil War.
Civil War. That's right, the Civil War. Oregon State, they're again trying to fight for bowl eligibility, sitting there at 5-6. Oregon 9-2. Notre Dame Stanford. That's a Fox game. That's interesting.
Yeah, I was surprised to see that.
That's really interesting, actually. Yeah, Notre Dame's sitting there at 16 at 9-2. Stanford 4-7, so they're not going to make a bowl game this year. Tulane travels to SMU. Tulane is bowl eligible. They're at 6-5. SMU they're at 9-2, ranked 25th. Texas A&M goes to LSU. That's a prime time Saturday night. LSU's favored by 16.5 there.
That's a trap game.
I think so.
If you're LSU, because like we mentioned, Texas A&M isn't bad. They've already played 2 number 1 teams in the country.
Right.
They just played. That was Georgia close, and if I'm LSU, you take this game and you treat it like it's the SEC championship.
Sure. Absolutely. Then we go down here to Iowa State. They travel to Kansas State. Both teams right there are 7-4. Colorado goes to Utah. As we mentioned, Utah's 10-1. Colorado's sitting there 5-6. They're trying to get bowl eligible as well.
Look at that line for Utah, 28.5.
25.
points.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, you go back down here to Florida State. Travels to Florida. Florida State's sitting there 6-5, and Florida 9-2. The line's 17 points right there. And we go down to the Red River. Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Is that still played at the Cotton Bowl?
No, it looks like that's bounced back and forth because Oklahoma State's in Stillwater, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I guess it's Oklahoma, Texas at the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, Oklahoma State travels to Oklahoma Oklahoma State. Oklahoma sitting there at 10-1. Oklahoma State they're 9-3.
And that's going to be a fun game to watch if you like some good football.
If you like watching no defense.
Yeah, I mean because both their defense are they're giving up less than a point difference to opposing offenses. Yardage wise, Oklahoma is gaining about 100 yards more. But it's really interesting to watch and see just how this team is going to play.
Sure.
Oklahoma, they're going to play for the conference championship, but you don't help the conference, or I guess you do help the conference a little bit if you all start beating each other up. It's like, Look at how strong we are. We've got a bunch of ranked teams, and they all have to play each other.
That's like Big Ten basketball.
Exactly. Big Ten's always ranked in basketball, always highly ranked, and for good reason.
Absolutely. Going back up the list here, a game that has a lot of implications. Wisconsin travels to Minnesota. First time ever College game day is going to be in Minnesota. That's huge. Wisconsin's sitting there at 9-2, Minnesota 10-1, and Wisconsin's favored by 2.5.
That's
an interesting line because it being a home game from Minnesota, usually give them 3, but Wisconsin comes in 2.5-point favorites.
I just think that Wisconsin defense is so strong. Yeah, they got blasted by Ohio State, but that Wisconsin defense is nasty. It's gonna come down to PJ Fleck and his game plan. It's not going to come down to anything else. It's going to come down to what PJ Fleck draws up and says, guys, this is what we have to focus on.
Sure. Then we got Georgia going to Georgia Tech. That's really 10-1 versus an 8 or 3-8. Not a whole lot going on there. Go up the board here. Clemson goes to South Carolina. Again, South Carolina, they beat Georgia earlier this year, so who knows? Clemson kind of, talk about a trap game. Clemson better be careful. It's at South Carolina, and they've upset somebody earlier this year. They can do it again.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. South Carolina is one of those sneaky teams. I mean, you look at their scores on the year. They lost to UNC by 4. They lost to Alabama by a large margin. Everybody does. They lost to Appalachian State by 4, who's ranked. So, they're clearly not terrible.
No.
But, some of their wins have been, they beat Georgia earlier this year. That was the big win of the season. So, yeah, it'll be really interesting to see.
They do come into this game to 27.5-point favorites. And we go back to Georgia Tech. UGA is up there at 28.5 points. And then, heck, we mentioned, too, Rutgers, Penn State. Penn State's 40. So really,
that's a big margin there.
A couple big margins there. Get the Iron Bowl here. Alabama travels to Auburn. I think Auburn can get this one done. Alabama only comes in as 3.5-point favorites.
And I'm really excited to see this one roll out. They got Mac Jones under center for Alabama now. Sure, he had a solid week last week against Western Carolina University,
and he's going into his first second true week of practice.
Right. So this will be a big test for him. You said it's at Auburn, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So hostile environment. These people are hungry for a win over Alabama. One, it takes them completely out of the playoff discussion. There's no way a 2-loss Alabama makes it in. But two,
that's the opportunity for Utah to sneak in.
That's the opportunity for Utah. So if you're a Utes fan, you are pulling for Auburn this weekend. You are begging them to beat Alabama. Only need to beat them by 1. You don't need to beat them by 30, 50. You need to beat them by 1. And if you're Utah, you are cheering for that result. Please.
Absolutely. And Auburn's got for a freshman quarterback in Bo Nix, he's looked pretty good this year, I would think. And Alabama's still 65.7 in the match makeup predictor. They're still favored to win by 67 or 65%, really. So, but yeah, Bo Nix on the year, he's thrown for just under 2,200 yards. And Whitlow, the running back, is just under 700 yards rushing.
Yeah, they look really strong in general.
Yeah, and this game being at Auburn helps tremendously.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they've lost to the number 10 team, the number 2 team, and the number 4 team on the season, all by a combined score of 21. That's, LSU was their closest loss. They lost by a field goal there.
Yeah. And at the beginning of the year, they beat Oregon by 6.
Yeah, this is a really good football team, and things are clicking for them. But I really think that if you're betting out there, I say you take Auburn. I really do.
Yeah, I think it's not a bad take, really. I mean, it's going to be really, like I said, we mentioned, it's at Auburn. I think that's a huge difference when it comes down to it. So the game everybody loves. Me, I live for this day. The Buckeyes travel up to Ann Arbor Saturday. Buckeyes go there up only 8-point favorites.
Yeah,
against a 9-2 Wolverine squad. I mean, you really throw records out, you throw rankings out. It's kind of one of those games where
none of it matters.
None of it really matters now. Justin Fields comes into this game with 175 and 252. For 2,352 yards, 33 touchdowns, 1 interception. Shea Patterson, 179 of 301 for 2,523 yards, 21 touchdowns, and 5 picks. The difference, though, is the rushing game here. J.K. Dobbins, 219 carries in the year, 1,446 yards. And Zach Charbonnet, 123 yards for 635, 11 touchdowns. Dobbins has 15. And receiving-wise, the leading receivers, Nico Collins and Chris Olave, are pretty similar in numbers-wise. Olave was 637 and Collins was 649. Olave edges him out there in touchdowns. That was 10-7.
So, you dive a little bit further into their full schedules. Michigan's big turnaround point, and everybody's been talking about it, was
second half of Penn State.
Exactly. Yeah. That's been the big talking point. Sure, you look at who they've played. Notre Dame, obviously that was a huge win. That you can't overlook that. But then they played Maryland. They followed that up with Michigan State, a rivalry game, which again you have to throw the records out, whatever. But and then with Indiana, which was a potential trap game.
Yeah, I said that earlier this year too. IU, they always play like Ohio State tough, but they didn't this year.
Right.
And they had the potential to
Play
go wire to wire with Michigan, and they didn't.
Yeah.
And they kind of blew that out there. But pulling up team stats here, points per game, Ohio State's just under 50. Michigan's at 33.5. Points allowed, Buckeyes are 10.5. Michigan's at 16.2. Total yards, 530 to 402. So really, the only thing, Michigan, they give up 261 yards passing,
and 105.
105 yards rushing. Yeah, and the Buckeyes don't give up 100 yards rushing. They haven't. I don't think they have all year long.
No, I don't think so. I think they shut down Jonathan Taylor pretty good.
Yeah, he didn't have. I don't think he had 60 yards, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think he was held at like 58 yards or something stupid.
Something like that. Yeah. So really, I mean, it's the game. It's what I live for. It's the weekend I live for. I told my fiance, I go, this weekend determines my happiness for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean,
and we get married this year. So
and everybody wants to talk about. This game means so much. That game means so much. One of our college football writers wrote a great article on the Army-Navy game last week, talking about the history in there. And I really appreciate and I respect that game. It's a beautiful rivalry game. But I'm sorry, I don't care where you are in the Midwest, in the Southwest, the West, the East. I don't care. This is the game people all over the country turn on. I'll watch the Iron Bowl because it'll be on. It'll be on after this game. But I don't go out of my way to watch it. Like, it'll just be on.
Right. It'll be a game that's on the background. And, I was at the game. I've been to the game twice. It was 2007. We were 1. They were 2. I was at that one. And then I was there in, was that 14? Yeah, I think it was 2014. I went up to Ann Arbor for that one as well. That's when Tyvis Powell intercepted it in the end zone in the 2-point conversion from Denard Robinson.
No, that was Devin Gardner.
Devin Gardner, that's right.
Denard Robinson had graduated the year before.
That's right, yeah. And so I was at that one, and it's an experience, to say the least.
It is. I was at the 2011 game. Ohio State was finished that year 6-6.
Yeah, when Fickell was the head coach.
Yep, when Fickell was filling in. And everybody wants to say, oh, well, that's because they had an interim. It doesn't matter. Like, that never matters because it's...
Because we lost to Purdue that year also.
Because that rivalry game is so important. I don't care if you have 0 wins on the year. If you beat your chief rival, your season is saved. Coaches lose their jobs over this game. Now, I don't think Harbaugh will lose his job should Michigan lose this game. I think that he's made a really significant turnaround on this season. So people are like, all right, we'll give you a little bit of pass. You beat Michigan State. You beat Notre Dame. But so much rides on this. Michigan would love to play spoiler to Ohio State making the playoffs. I know that they would love to see that. You're the 13 team in the country and you knock off number 2. Ohio State doesn't get in. Like, doesn't matter if they...
But see, even if we, for some reason, say that does happen, I think we still get into the playoffs with the Big Ten championship.
So, assuming you guys would follow it up with beating Minnesota, then?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know, man.
Because that's gonna be that area where, depending on what happens, and expecting Georgia loses to LSU, we would get in before a 1-loss Big Ten championship would get in before a 1-loss Utah. If that makes sense.
Ooh, I don't know, because you got to look at how recent that loss is.
Right, but what they're going to do though, they do this every year. Which team draws more money?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's
which
always
team
about
travels better? Which team travels better? Utah doesn't travel like Ohio State does.
No, they don't.
So that's one thing they will look at because they always do.
So all bias aside, which I know is hard for us right now as you're the Ohio State guy and I'm the Michigan guy. Give me one positive thing that you've liked from Michigan in the last couple weeks, and I will return the same for Ohio State.
I think Shea Patterson's finally found his groove. He started off the year extremely slow, and there was so many high hopes for him last year. I don't think he really obtained those accolades like they thought he would. But this year, as of late, of course, that second half of the Penn State game, he's kind of found his niche, and the offense has kind of clicked.
All right. Yeah, no, I can definitely agree with that. He's looked really solid, especially the last 2 weeks, winning 2 Big Ten Player of the Week awards in back-to-back weeks. I have never seen a more dynamic runner in college football this year than I have in J.K. Dobbins. He's really, really good in the backfield. I really like his ability to catch on the run, and he doesn't go down. And for me, that's so critical if you're a running back. His catches, he doesn't get many targets, but like even, in the last month and a half, he's had eight catches, and he's had, over 100 yards on those catches and 1 touchdown. Like, that's not bad. And I really admire
He's
that.
a guy who's hard to bring down. He did an interview with Kurt Herbstreit the other day, and he dropped a ton of body fat, built a bunch more muscle, and he's squatting like 600 some pounds. So he's got legs, and it's hard to tackle. He's kind of like a Saquon Barkley body type.
Yeah, very low center of gravity. I'm just going to run right through you. So I really admire J.K. Dobbins, checking in at 5'10", 217. He runs hard and he runs smart. And I think that's more what impresses me is that he can run really hard, but he's smart with it. He doesn't try to create a lane if he doesn't have to.
He tends to just run over people.
Yeah.
That's kind of what he does. And he takes good care of the football, minus he had a fumble this past week.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he's 15 touchdowns, 219 attempts, 15 touchdowns on the year.
Right.
And he's not bad. He's running over people. He's hanging out of the football, and he creates lanes. If they're not there, he creates one.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was saying. If there's a lane, he takes it, but he won't force it if he doesn't have to. It's like, all right, nothing's opening up. Now I go. I'm just going to take it and say screw it and see what happens. But he's really good at running over defenders. All right, score prediction, and then we'll move on to our next segment. I say I'm going to stick with my fandom here. I think Michigan can pull the upset the way they did back in 1969. But I think it's going to come down to a field goal. I think Michigan wins it. It's going to be a lower scoring game. I think Michigan wins it 27-24.
27-24, okay. Mine's not going to be that close for the simple fact that Michigan hasn't seen an offense like this, I think, all year long.
Sure.
And Chase Young, he's hungry, as we saw this past
week. A little bit, yeah. just a little angry. And defensively, Michigan hasn't seen a defense like this, I don't think, either this year. No.
Because I'm trying to go through who else in the Big Ten who has a good defense. Obviously, Wisconsin did, and they won that game. Notre Dame, who knows? They're kind of suspect when it comes to
they really are.
To that.
Michigan State, you could kind of point to having a decent defense, but even then,
and they were even down their number one defensive player too.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
I think the closest comparisons in terms of games would be you point to Michigan State, Penn State, and Indiana.
Yeah.
Those are the 3 kind of key comparison games.
Yeah.
Because Maryland, Rutgers, those don't count. Like, you have to throw them out.
Yeah. I think my score, I'm going to go 31-14 Buckeyes.
Okay. Cool. So we will lock those scores in for everybody tuning in at home. I do have a mailbag for us from Austin from Twitter. He asked, what are our top 3 rivalries? Well, Austin, we're both an Ohio State and Michigan fan, so you can just write in number 1, the game. For me, I don't know if he's asking like personal or which ones we think have the most pageantry.
I go personal.
So yeah, I'm gonna go personal.
They go personal because I think ours will be different.
Yeah, that's fair. I really like the Battle of I-75. Didn't like the result this year, obviously, but for me that's a really big one. And I'm gonna have to say I really like watching the Red River Shootout. That's a fun rivalry game. The fans get excited. Burn Orange, taking on some good old Crimson. It's a thing of beauty, and it's really fun to see, especially when both teams are highly ranked and their hearts are in it.
Sure.
So what about you? Obviously the game.
Oh yeah, the game's number one for me. One rivalry game I have come to accustom of the past 2 years or so, is Montana State. Just because I have ties with both of those schools.
Okay.
That game actually was this past weekend as well. Montana State won that 48-14, but both teams are 9-3.
Oh wow.
And they'll both be going to the FCS playoffs.
Very nice.
But yeah, I mean those schools are only 2 hours away, so their fan bases are very close. And
Very
so
familiar.
those are very familiar. So that's kind of a fun one to pay attention to. But I never knew about it until like I said, 2 years ago.
Right.
But you said the Battle of I-75. That's a great one. Being a Ball State guy, Northern Illinois is kind of our big game. That was always fun to pay attention to. Man, it's so tough because there's so many great ones. What was the one? It's not. I'm not gonna put this on the list, but it was UCF and UConn. They played for some dumb trophy too.
Yeah. Oh, let me look that up real quick. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it was like the coach. Well, I think it was like when Scott Frost was there, he said screw it and just left the trophy at the stadium. He didn't care that much. But it was civil conflict. I think it was a civil conflict.
That's what that's called, the civil conflict.
Yeah, it was a trophy that made absolutely no sense because it's UConn in Florida, or in South or Central Florida, so it has no bearing on anything really.
Yeah. The first meeting was in 2013.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah. So I think that was the thing that Scott Frost was like, okay, we're not going to really care too much about this one. Man, it's just so tough because there's so many Army-Navy you can throw in there too because that's a great one.
Yeah, phenomenal game.
That's one everybody kind of stops and watches when it's on because it's always, there's no college football on that day.
Right.
I think is it in Philadelphia this year?
I believe it is actually. I can take a quick peek, but I do believe.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is
Philly. Because that would be a Week 15 game.
Mm-hmm.
No, that would be a Week 16 game, actually, technically. Because it takes place after the conference championships for whatever reason.
Yeah, I guess it does, doesn't it?
I will go.
Which I am going to the Big Ten Championship. I'm very excited about that.
Very nice.
It's just down the road for me in Indianapolis. That'll be a good time. And I bought my tickets before we beat Penn State because I knew if we had won that, tickets were going to shoot up. So got that stuff taken care of, thank God.
That game is at Lincoln Financial Field.
Okay, so in Philly.
Yep.
Okay. I guess my other one, man, I think Florida State. Because I think that's,
That's a really, really good rivalry.
Yeah, because I think it's all those guys know each other. They all come from the same recruiting areas in Florida, and so it's kind of, that's huge for both schools because it's recruiting. It's state pride, it's recruiting, it's all that stuff. So I think I'm gonna go Florida State.
All right, I like it.
And go back 10 years ago when Winston was there, and Tebow before him in Florida, and those guys battled.
Yeah, it was never one of those games that you came out and you're like, oh, we know who's going to win. Like, it was always a coin toss.
Sure. And now Florida State can't find a head coach.
Right. Well, you can't win them all, right?
No.
All right, let's move into this next segment. This will be the last segment of the night. Our Group of Five check-in. The conferences nobody gives love to. We already kind of touched on the WAC and the AAC a little bit, so not the WAC, the Mountain West and the AAC. So let's touch on the MAC, the WAC, and the Sun Belt.
Yeah, MAC conference. We kind of touched on it a little bit last week. Akron came so close to beating Miami of Ohio there. And then Ball State, they gave up one to Kent State. 41-38. Kind of just Ball State led that entire game until the fourth quarter. So
Toledo laid an egg in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Just Buffalo really ran away with that. It looked close for a little while, but Toledo just couldn't keep up, and that's frustrating. 49-30 was the final. And as a Toledo fan, I don't want to say we've been disgusted with the season, but we considered the season a lost season after we lost to Bowling Green.
Week 2.
Yeah, like
why isn't that game the last game of the year rivalry week?
It used to be. It used to be on Friday. So it was on Black Friday. But it was about money.
I remember that.
It was about money and
TV time.
Yep, and the MAC was like, well, if we move it earlier, we can get more people to watch it because during rivalry week, everybody else is watching these other great rivalry games. So they're like,
especially where being those two schools are right in the middle of Columbus and Ann Arbor.
Exactly, like they don't get any love on that weekend, which is unfortunate.
Right. Looking here to this week, tomorrow action, Ohio goes to Akron. Ohio sitting there at 5-6, try to get they'll get bowl eligible tomorrow. With Akron being 0-11. Ohio is favored by 27.5.
Wouldn't that be incredible if Akron just pulled that upset though?
Right, that would be. I mean, Frank Solich just got his 200th win.
Yeah.
Or something like that last week.
111th in the MAC, which is the most of any MAC coach.
Okay, that's what it was. Yeah. Then Western Michigan, they traveled to Northern Illinois. Western sitting there at 7-4. Northern Illinois having a down year at 4-7. Miami of Ohio travels to Muncie. I kind of thought about going to that game. I still might. Being that's down the road for me. BG travels to Buffalo. BG 3-8. Buffalo 6-5. Kent State sitting there at 5-6. They travel to Eastern, who is 6-5. And then Toledo travels to Central. Toledo's sitting there at 6-5, and Central at 7-4.
And I don't see Toledo winning that game.
No, Central is favored there by 9.5.
Toledo has been awful on the road. Toledo's won one road game this year.
That's tough.
And you can't compete in college football if you can't win on the road. I don't care who you are. You need to be able to win on the road. I don't want to say the circles are already starting to say, oh, Jason Candle better start looking for another job. I don't think it's gotten that far yet, but if Toledo produces another season like this one, I think he's a little bit on the hot seat. He just signed a big extension after winning the MAC championship 2 years ago too.
Right.
So, I don't know. It's tough.
It is. Moving over here to the Sun Belt Conference, we talked about Appalachian State and Troy. Arkansas State 7-4. They travel to South Alabama, who's 1-10. Texas State, they're 3-8. They travel to Coastal Carolina, they're 4-7. Georgia State, they are 7-4. They travel to Georgia Southern, who's 6-5. Then Louisiana Lafayette Monroe, they're 5-6. They travel to Louisiana Raging Cajuns, who are 9-2.
And that's kind of an interesting little rivalry game as well. That's both are still both are not still in contention for the West. But if UL Monroe can upset them, Arkansas State goes to the Sun Belt Championship, which would be heartbreaking for Louisiana, of course. But that's what those rivalry games do. They break your heart.
Sure. Over here, we'll transfer over to the Mountain West. We talked about Boise State. They go to Colorado State on Friday. Then Saturday, this will be kind of a good one here. I think Wyoming goes to Air Force. Wyoming sitting there at 7-4. Air Force 9-2. Air Force is favored by 10 even there. UNLV, they travel to Nevada. That's an in-state rivalry. UNLV is 3-8. Nevada's sitting there at 7-4. Utah State travels to New Mexico. Utah State, they're sitting at 6-5. New Mexico sitting there at 2-9. BYU, who's always one of those teams, they're kind of up and down. They'll win a big, they'll beat a top-ranked team and then lose to some nobody.
Yep.
They do that every year. They're sitting there. So this will be a good one here too. They're sitting there 7-4. They travel to San Diego State, who's 8-3. BYU is the favorite there by 3 points, which is kind of interesting. Fresno State travels to San Jose State. Those teams are both 6-4. Excuse me, 4-7.
Yeah.
Too many numbers here going on here. Army, they're trying to get bowl eligible here. They started off the year very strong.
Yeah, they did.
And they're kind of slipped here as of late. They travel to Hawaii. What a trip that is!
That's going to be fun.
From West Point, New York, all the way to Hawaii. That's gonna be miserable.
It's gonna be miserable for them, but it's gonna be so fun for the fans.
Right.
The ones making the trip, representing Army, obviously, but then the Hawaii fans as well, because Hawaii came out east last year to take on Army. So I think if you're Hawaii, you love to see that home and home return especially for a non-conference game.
Sure, and I remember a couple years ago, Hawaii had that quarterback who was like Heisman contender.
Mm-hmm.
They were studs, and then the coach at the time, their coach then, is now coaching the XFL.
Yep.
But Army, they are 5-6. They travel to Hawaii, who's 8-4 on the year, and Hawaii's favored by 3.5 points there. That's crazy too, because you look at the time on that, 11:59 p.m. That starts at midnight our time.
Yeah, that's
ridiculous.
I think you were talking Colt Brennan, by the way. Was
Colt Brennan? Yep, yeah. That's it.
He
was a stud.
Yeah, he looked really good. He was a Heisman front runner for a while. I don't know what happened. I don't remember how he finished, but I want to say that was like 2014.
I was going to say earlier than that.
Was it earlier than that?
I think so.
Yeah, it may have been earlier than that, but I mean that kid was a solid player. He was fun. Oh yeah, no, that was because
he was drafted in 08.
Yeah. I don't know why I thought it was that recent.
He was drafted by the Redskins in the 6th round with the 186th pick that year.
Yeah.
And he was a stud. And I think, let's see here, he was with the Skins for 08-09, the Oakland Raiders 2010, and then Hartford Colonials, that's United Football League, and then Canada for a year, then LA, the Arena League for a year also, the LA Kiss.
Yeah, he had quite the career at Hawaii. I mean, he really turned himself around from the days at Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
He went to that Saddleback College, helped him win a conference championship and was an honorable mention for JUCO, which was really, really cool. But he really turned his life around at Hawaii, and I hope he's doing well. He's done playing football, right? He hasn't played.
Yeah, he's been out of the league for a while.
Yeah.
Because he went to the XFL, and that was kind of it.
Mm-hmm. But
now, this is a league I totally forgot about too. Is the Arena Football League?
Dude, I had that video game growing up for the original Xbox, and I would always play as the Columbus. I think they're the Destroyers.
Yeah.
And
I think they're coming back actually.
Yeah, and that was always so fun because you could like tackle guys over the walls and like you didn't get fouled for it. Like it was great, and I'm like, this needs to be football all the time.
And I'm looking here too, like Kiss, the rock band. They had a team, the LA Kiss, and they only lasted 2 years. And you go to the owners, it's literally Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, and Doc McGee.
Yeah,
all Kiss people. So he was the manager for the Kiss, Bon Jovi, Motley Crue, and Hootie and the Blowfish.
Mm-hmm.
But they folded in 2016.
Gotcha. Okay.
What a great league that was.
Oh man, that was.
But
that's
who Colt Brennan went with for a little while there.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for us today.
That's a wrap.
All right. So guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you do follow us on Facebook at Across the Board for our articles, podcast, and more. You can follow the Facebook page. Again, like I said, Across the Board, or you can follow us on Twitter at ATB Sportsnet. And if you want to follow our podcast links, you can follow them at ATB Sports Pod. If you do want fantasy football advice, we have the best guys in the business. They are the Beard Brothers Fantasy Football Podcast. They're available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or you can just check them out on Twitter at Beard Bros FF. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll check back with you next week after Rivalry Week. If I survive, if AJ survives, next week we'll be telling who sounds happy on the podcast. So
absolutely.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. AJ, as always, pleasure. And
likewise, man.
We will see you guys later.